Bitcoin went over 100K for the first time ever a couple of days ago. And in this video, I want to go ahead and break down my thoughts on the current market. I want to explain why it is I think that we're still very early and why there is a supply shock coming, a supply crunch that will push the Bitcoin prices even higher next year. But before we get into that, be sure to subscribe, be sure to hit that like button, and be sure to follow me on X and Threads. So Bitcoin went all the way up to about 103,000 and came back down again. You can see here on the 5th or so of December that we had this really weird looking candle with a long wick to the top and the bottom, meaning that there's a lot of liquidations on both sides, both short and long liquidations that happened. And Bitcoin is trying to find some support in an area in which it's never been before. So as soon as we cross that kind of 100K level, I'm going to go ahead and change this here to blue. That indicates that my kind of support level for Bitcoin. And there's a good reason why we saw Bitcoin take off this week. And we got news that the incoming administration, the Trump administration, is going to be appointing a new SEC chair. Now, I said before in a previous video that Gary Gensler is quite possibly one of the worst men ever for crypto and especially for Bitcoin adoption. Now you're having a new SEC chair pick come in that's going to most likely be confirmed next year when the new administration takes place. So this new SEC chair, Paul Atkins, he's a complete, I would say, a complete 180 from Gary Gensler. And in fact, if you go down here, we can actually see here where he talks about crypto and the fact that things are going to get a lot easier for these crypto companies and for Bitcoin especially. He said that if the SEC were more accommodating and would deal straightforwardly with these various firms, I think it'd be a lot easier or a lot better to have things happen here in the United States rather than outside. Talking about crypto, okay? He was the co-chair of the crypto advocacy group Digital Chambers Token Alliance in 2017. And Mr. Atkins, I think, is going to be very crypto friendly in his term as the SEC chair. And this is important because Bitcoin adoption has been kind of stuck in neutral, but it's been increasing over the past, I'd say about the past couple of months, specifically with the new administration coming in, specifically with the idea that Gary Gensler is finally going to be gone. And now you also see some interest, some strong interest in owning crypto, specifically for Bitcoin. And that's the thing. That's the next thing I want to go ahead and talk about, and that is the cryptocurrency and Bitcoin adoption rate. Now, this is one of the reasons why I think that we're going to wind up seeing a large supply shock in the next year. And the important part of this is basically that this group came out here and they had this cryptocurrency adoption and sentiment report from security.org. And they said that 40% of American adults now own crypto, up from 30% in 2023. Now, that's huge. Honestly, that's pretty dang big because when we start to think about the adoption curve, which I'm going to show you guys in a minute, when you start to think about the adoption curve, you start to realize that in order for Bitcoin to really take off as a currency, as a store of value, you have to have people that actually use it. And keep this in mind, 40% of Americans now own crypto, but how many people own and hold Bitcoin in the world? So if you go to here to bitbo.io, they actually say about 106 million people use Bitcoin. Or hold Bitcoin, and they look at the addresses, and the addresses they can figure out basically that there are 106 million. That's kind of a flawed methodology. I do think that there are multiple people who own multiple specific addresses, so it's possible it's a lot lower than this. But just take into account about 100 million people in the world that use or own Bitcoin, and then look at the software adoption or the adoption curve. And first, we start off with just the tech enthusiasts, the early market, visionaries, going up to early adopters. And then you see this kind of chasm that they talk about. And the chasm is basically when it finally starts to go mainstream. So I do believe that we're actually well within this early majority, but I would say that we're probably about the start of this early majority. If you believe that 40% of Americans own Bitcoin or use Bitcoin, then that means that we are probably about halfway through this early majority of the mainstream market. And so that means that there's a lot more room left to grow. They go up here, this kind of the top, the peak here. between the early and the late majority. And then after that, you get to the conservatives and the skeptics, the laggards. And this right here is where a large amount of the Bitcoin value is going to come from, because Bitcoin is just now starting to enter the mainstream market. And this is especially the case when we get a new SEC chair. That's going to make things a lot easier for institutional investors to come in and buy Bitcoin for their portfolios. In fact, we've already seen huge institutional interest in crypto and Bitcoin, especially. There's a lot of people that go on to social media and they talk about, okay, well, we've heard, our clients want to invest in Bitcoin, and we want to look at new ways of funding. We want a store of value, some way to prevent our money from being devalued constantly. So they want to go ahead and find a new digital gold, and that is Bitcoin. And this is also seen when we take a look at the SoSo Value, the Bitcoin spot ETF tracker. And we can see here that this white line is the total net assets held by Bitcoin spot ETFs. It's at $112 billion right now, and it's never been this high before. Institutional interest in Bitcoin and amongst retail traders in the traditional markets is going up. And this right here, this is the start of an excellent bull cycle. I have not sold any of my Bitcoin. I am not planning on selling any of my Bitcoin for a little while still, because I think that we're right in the middle of a bull cycle, and I do believe that we can have higher and higher and higher prices. I previously said that it's possible that 150,000 is on the table before the end of next year. I think that's still very possible, considering where we are in the adoption curve right now, which we're, I think, right in the early majority pragmatists section of the adoption curve. And as things get farther and farther and farther in time, and especially as it becomes more mainstream, you're going to have more demand for Bitcoin. So we have more demand for Bitcoin. And as you guys can see, if you take a look at the exchange reserve, the number of Bitcoin on exchanges, it continues to go lower and lower and lower every single week. I'm showing you guys this chart, and every single week it continues to go lower and lower. People are taking their Bitcoin off of exchanges, and eventually there's just not going to be enough, okay? Not only do you have less Bitcoin on exchanges, but you also have a lower new supply of Bitcoin being mined. We can see here that after the halving, you went from about 920 Bitcoin down to about 450, right? Because that's halving. The number of new Bitcoin coming out of the market has been halved because of the way Bitcoin works. So you're having less supply going on the market, you're having less Bitcoin on exchanges, and this is going to lead to a supply crunch. And I do think that we're in the middle of seeing this supply crunch. It's the reason why Bitcoin has rallied so massively from just this year alone. I mean, this year, coming into this year, we were wondering if Bitcoin was going to go to 100K, and in fact, it did. And just it's worth looking and going back to the start of the year to realize how far we've come. I mean, the year basically started off here at about around 43K, and now we're well over double that. So it's been kind of a blistering rally. Bitcoin's used to doing this kind of thing. This is very normal for Bitcoin to go out and rally like this. But that being said, Bitcoin is still undervalued. If you take a look at the Bitcoin MVRVZ score, this is something I show you guys a lot as well, and we're still sitting at about 3.15. Now, Bitcoin under 1 is usually considered to be undervalued, but it's not overvalued because, again, Bitcoin at the bull market tops goes all the way up to almost 6 or 7, and we're sitting at about a 3. So this is something to pay attention to. I will watch this. I will let you guys know when I think that the market's getting overheated, when we're close to a Bitcoin bull market top. And if you guys are interested in seeing that, make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you check out my X and my threads. I try to do daily updates on that. And make sure you check out my other videos when I talk about my portfolio and my plans on profiting from this Bitcoin cycle. But let me know what you guys are doing right now. If you're buying, if you're selling, if you're waiting for 150, if you think that it's a good idea to start DCAing out or maybe even DCAing in, leave a comment below and I'll catch you guys on the next video.